Welcome to This Golfing Life, a Sounder podcast. My name is Dan Davies, and each week I speak to a different guest about golf, life, and the relationship between the two.
The Open isn't just about people who play golf. It's people of every class, and for them to collide with Portrush and then at golf was bringing it to my hometown was astonishing and very important, and it has united so many people here as well. I was sitting in a bar in Derry, the Strand Hotel, which famously was there during the Troubles. And there was a kind of a porthole behind me, and this guy grabbed my shoulder and said, "Who am I?" And I looked at him and I said, "You're Bubbles Donaghy. You were the first person shot on Bloody Sunday. You were shot in the thigh." And he kind of reached across and said, "Right, you'll do for us." And it was confirmation that I had done the work. And from that point on, I realised that it was a responsibility. There was a bit of me that early on was fascinated about what could potentially be the loneliness of a golfer, because you've only really got yourself to blame. It's really about fighting so much within yourself. I mean, I'm not maybe the best person to play golf because it gets into my head a lot.
Well, you and I, when we play together, it's like some sort of self-help group without any help.
I know, it's extraordinary. I mean, Freud literally is in his coffin looking at us going, "Well, I told you." And you could sense it. And the peace process had only just started, but you could also sense people thinking, he's one of ours. At a very early age, he connected with the power of what he had and the potential he had to help others. And that is clearly rooted in his childhood with Rosie and Jerry. Just the understanding of a pound, the understanding of sacrifice, the understanding of still being respectful, but also the understanding I think he had of his brilliance and his kind of responsibility to that and what that potential that could do for others. That's why I love about him so much. I think he's a complete person. I think he's got the rarest quality of all. I think he's got humanity, and I think that we should be grateful for it. I love him.
Today's guest is one of Britain's best loved actors, the star of Cold Feet, Bloody Sunday, and numerous other critically acclaimed dramas. He's also a passionate Northern Irishman, a devoted Manchester United fan, and a golfer to his core. A member at Royal Portrush, where he lives. He's a close friend to Alex Ferguson and Rory McIlroy. He's also one of the best people to have on a golf tour. So welcome to This Golfing Life, Mr. James Nesbitt. Jimmy Nesbitt, great to see you. One of my favourite people in golf, resident of Portrush, which is, I think, mutually one of our favourite places in the world. What does Portrush mean to you, Jimmy?
It's everything really to me. I mean, I grew up in the country, in County Antrim. My father was a rural primary school headmaster. He was my headmaster in a very small school. And when I was 10, he moved to a slightly bigger school in Coleraine, which is one of the major towns of the north of Ireland. And it's 4 miles from Portrush. So from the age of 11, every summer was about Portrush. And, and I did a lot of my growing up in Portrush and it's a great place to do that. As a teenager, it was the first real place to escape to. Also, as a little seaside summer town on the north coast of Ireland with the Atlantic crashing in, it is spectacular in terms of just its natural beauty and scenery, but also as a seaside town for holiday makers to come when they couldn't either afford to go abroad, but also a place to go during the Troubles. Even then, Portrush was a kind of a haven, and it had two great things, really. I mean, many great things, apart from the natural beauty. There was the amusements arcade, a very, very famous amusements called Barry's, which was threatened with closure a few years ago, but it's been taken over and it's now called Curry's, but everyone still calls it Barry's actually. And alongside that was the golf course. So to me, it really was where I kind of transformed from young boy into teen, into older teen. So all the glory years, really. And then I moved away. I went to drama school. I was in London for 30 years where I raised, and my ex Sonia raised our two kids. But I would come, you can leave Ireland, but for me, it's always been my home, and which says a lot about a place, particularly considering the backdrop to what I grew up in, although the Troubles were only just up the road. But for me, it's always been Ireland, particularly the north and particularly Portrush. And so when my big girls had grown up, the opportunity came to move back, and I took it. And my mother grew up by the sea, and she said, "James," and I spent a lot of my early childhood with my granny by the sea, and my mother used to say to me, "James, you always return to the sea," and I have, and it's everything to me.
There's something very special about living by the sea, which I've discovered in the
Mm.
last 5 years. It is soul enriching, but we've had so many good times in Portrush. I mean, I find you and Portrush sort of synonymous in many ways. You know, amazing weekends playing golf out in the town, and you live, you know, so close to the golf course. You can almost
Yeah.
look over it from your house.
Yeah,
Can't
no,
you?
it's fabulous. And as you say, I mean, you, I, and a bunch of others have shared some great times there. And you know, and Portrush, it is a golf course, enormously significant, enormous significance, but also it sits well in the town, I think, you know, because kind of grounds the golf course a bit. I don't think the fact that it's in Portrush and that so many people come to Portrush. And for me, it's a real challenge, as you know, but it has been a tremendously important glue as Northern Ireland continues to evolve. Because when I grew up, people saw all over the world the north of Ireland as a place of conflict. And now, thanks in no small part to the success of the Open in Portrush, the two Opens, and success really in kind of totally down to that. I think the world now sees the north of Ireland as it evolves from its past, but they see it as a place of real natural and outstanding beauty, thanks to those pictures that have been beamed all over the world. And you know, it wasn't just golf, the golf course that has benefited from the Open. I mean, it's been the whole of the north of Ireland and Portrush, and also particularly boys like, again, who you know, the McAlpin brothers who own the Harbour and all those restaurants. I mean, which is again is a lot where I did a lot of my growing up. So it's so wonderful to be from there and to be able to kind of feel that you're sort of hosting and welcoming people from all across the world, when in the past all they wanted to do was leave.
Yeah, I mean, it is an incredibly welcoming place. You mentioned the restaurants, you know, down by the Harbour Bar. You know, there's just an incredible atmosphere about the place. And we were there at the 2019 Open, you know, staying
Yeah.
at your house. And what a week
Yeah.
that was when Shane Lowry won and the Open came back to Northern Ireland. It came back to Portrush. How did that make you feel? Because that was a long old process, wasn't it? And we sort of, you know, I'd started going to Portrush probably 10
Yeah.
years before that and had followed that slow process of the Open coming back. And now it's very much established as one of
Yeah.
the great Open venues. It delivers something that the others probably doesn't.
I agree. I think, you know, it was a long process, and some people had to be convinced, but I knew instinctively, in the same way that I saw what Game of Thrones did for the north of Ireland. That show was shot here, and people, as a result, came in there to hundreds of thousands to Northern Ireland. As I say, I have never, as I say, emotionally, I've never left home in my life. It's always Ireland, the north of Ireland has always been my home. And so to finally get to a stage where people were flocking here in their tens of thousands to my hometown where I now live, and seeing the beauty of it, pumping lots of money into the place, but also importantly for the north of Ireland and for that little place, you know, there has not always been incredible diversity there, you know, multi-ethnicity there, you know, and people from all classes, all colours, all creeds coming, and all religions coming from all over the world as well. Because, you know, the Open isn't just about people who play golf. You know, it's not just about the kind of council members and kind of rather stuffy blazers and etc. It's people of every class, and for them to collide with Portrush and then that golf was bringing it to my hometown was astonishing and very important, and it has united so many people here as well, because there are still divisions here, and it's only things like that that really is a unifier, as sport is. Because although there may be a lot of politics in the getting of it here, once it was on, politics disappears, and that's the beauty of sport and golf. And when you put it in those surroundings, the natural surroundings that Portrush offers, you know, it was a lot of us were very, very moved by it.
Yeah, it was absolutely incredible. I'd never witnessed scenes at an Open like those that I witnessed at Portrush in 2019 with, you know, Lowry
Wow.
coming down to win it. It was almost, you know, a fairy tale written. Golf has been massive. You know, you talk about the revitalization and the and focusing a light on Northern Ireland in an incredibly positive way. Golf has been huge in that. Not only Royal Portrush, Royal County Down, you know, two of the routinely voted the best golf courses in the world, and so many golf courses in Ireland, you know, that you know, as a wider entity.
Well, I think you know, I think it's interesting. I think Ireland, possibly in Northern Ireland, possibly looked at Scotland a lot over the years and thought, you know, we have got similar courses here. We have got as good courses, and it just took a time to get that kind of establishment. But you know, it's played an enormous part in kind of sport over the years, golf. I mean, it goes right back. I mean, if you go back to Christy O'Connor Senior and all those boys, and then Junior, and up in the north, and we had like
Mm.
people like Eddie Poland and then Ronan Rafferty. I mean, there was always significantly successful players in the European Tour, and then, of course, with the birth of Rory, I mean, it just took off. But so it's had a very important role in kind of global sport, and it's played an important part in that. But it needed something to take it really to the next level.
Yeah, the Irish Open was always, I think it's one of my
Yeah.
favorite tournaments of the year. It was always a really significant date on the European Tour calendar. Hugely historic tournament, one of the great national opens of the world. I mean, I remember very early on in my career in 1990, went to Portmarnock and watched a very young Jose
Wow.
Maria Lathobal beat Eamon Darcy
Yeah.
down the stretch. But the Irish Open should be up there, I believe, with the biggest golf tournaments in the world. And I think it's a shame that we're living in a world where it's harder. In those days, you got Seve
Yeah.
and Langer and Faldo and Woosnam, and all those guys were playing the Irish Open. More players should come over and play the Irish Open, especially, I think if they played it on links courses more often would be my
I mean, I've played in
view
quite
on
a
that.
few of the pro-ams, the Irish pro-ams recently, and I've been very lucky. I've played with Ernie Els, I played with Justin Rose, I played with Shane a couple of times, I played with Tommy Fleetwood. So I mean, a lot of the big European names certainly come to it. But I also think that scheduling is quite important in these things, and I think that they shift it around a little bit, but it should be seen as an absolutely marquee tournament because they they're very challenging courses, particularly as you say, the links courses, and I think they could do with more Americans coming.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what you feel about the sort of Americanization of the
Yeah,
sport. Even with what's happened with Live, and I'm certainly no fan of Live, but at least they were taking golf around the world, which was one aspect that I
yeah,
liked of their operation. There wasn't much else that I
yeah,
particularly liked, but I just find it a shame that the total Americanization of the professional game means that those players are playing in the United States for 80% of the time,
yeah.
70% of the time, and they don't we don't get a chance to get them over to things like the Irish Open. They come to the Scottish Open because it's a week before
No, indeed.
the Open and it gives them a chance to tune up. But the Irish should
I
be part of
agree,
that.
and I couldn't agree more. And it also surprises me that the players themselves don't want to. I mean, that's why sometimes I wonder about what they are prepared to give up. I think sometimes there's an imbalance in what they in the decisions they make. I mean, often it's money wins over prestige, but it's the fact that a lot of them wouldn't just want to come. That's why I always loved like some of the older American players who would never not come, like Freddie Couples coming to things, or everyone that would turn up. It seems that that some of the players themselves don't understand the history and importance of what these tournaments are and what it can challenge them with and what it can teach them about sort of even new places, new people, new cultures. They seem to be quite safe a lot of the time.
Well, that's been an issue, I think, with the PGA Tour for a
Yeah.
long time. They're very happy to stay at home and play at
Yeah.
home, and they have no real interest, which is a real shame. But I mean, with the recent run for Irish golf, Padraig Harrington, McDowell, Clark, Lowry, and of course Rory. I mean, again, not only to have the courses to be able to put a country on the map for something, but also these players. I mean, do you think that Rory is the new George Best in terms of not only his brilliance, but what he means for Northern Ireland?
Well, I think certainly. I mean, the only difference is that Roy doesn't seem to have that other part that George had. Which
Yeah.
a few of us have tried to emulate ourselves in Portrush over the years.
We certainly
But,
have.
even George will sometimes look at us and go, "No, that's good."
I think George would have been left in our wake on some of those weekends.
But in terms of, I think Roy's one of the most important sportsmen in the world at the minute. What he has done for Ireland, well,
I agree.
what he's and I've known him since he was young, like since he was a teenager, really. I first met him when I was hosting the opening of the Lough Erne Club, a great golf course down in Lough Erne, and it was a shootout between him and Padraig. And I was hosting it in the rain. And when I first met him in the clubhouse beforehand, he was, very respectful young guy. And Mr. Nesbitt this, and delighted to meet you, blah, blah, blah. We went out and He played 18 holes in the rain, and I walked around with him, and he was, talking away, and again, very polite. And I'd say, "Oh, sorry, excuse me." And then he'd go up and he'd hit this shot, and I think he shot 65 in really horrible conditions. And I just remember thinking, what is this? And you could sense it. You could sense it in the rain, and you could also sense people thinking. And the peace process had only just started, but you could also sense people thinking, he's one of ours. He's one of ours, And then he went on to great things. And then I was sort of a lot of ambassadorial work for his foundation, which he set up here as charity. At a very early age, he connected with young children and connected with the power of what he had and the potential he had to help others. And that is clearly rooted in his childhood with Rosie and Jerry. Just the understanding of a pound, the understanding of sacrifice, the understanding of still being respectful, but also the understanding I think he had of his brilliance and his kind of responsibility to that and what that potential that could do for others. That's why I love about him so much. I think he's a complete person.
Yeah, I think. Did you see Jimmy's Champions press conference before the Masters this year? He did. The incoming champion or defending champion always has to give a press conference. And I watched it, and it was mesmerizing. It was a masterclass, in terms of everything you've just said: humility, attitude,
honesty. His honesty,
exactly, honesty. Yeah,
and actually, people are scared of honesty at times because it might reveal too much, or it might reveal a weakness, or it might reveal something. I think he proves that actually you can have all of those things and yet fight and have attitude and never give in. I think he's extraordinary. My God, the pride that you feel. You talk about what it felt like for the Open to come to Portrush and all that. I mean, I cannot tell you the amount of different. You'll know the different amount of WhatsApp groups going on the night of that final few holes. I mean, people in Northern Ireland and in the island, and I know even people like you and people everywhere, because you cannot help but want them to win. You're just desperate for him, but he does not make it easy. It's like I always remember my mother never drank in her life, and she hated Alex Higgins. She hated everything that Alex Higgins stood for. Yet she was kind of mesmerized by him. And when he beat Jimmy White in the semi-final in 80 something, whatever it was, and he made this incredible break that he had to win to tie the frame, and the whole of Northern Ireland again were watching. And she disapproved of him so much, but she was knitting as she watched it. And by the end of the match, she'd knitted an arm about the size of, 6 feet, because she couldn't take her eyes off him. And Rory's like that. It was just, you're almost behind the sofa watching it, but it was, I think he's the most important sports person in the world, and probably the most brilliant.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I was, as I said, I was mesmerized by that press conference because he hit all the right notes. He talked about his parents, he talked about his upbringing, he talked about the struggles he's been through with that searing honesty that I think as a fan, it just takes you with him. You can't help but be swept up in it. But
I think he's so accessible, and it's like he is able to touch on. I mean, I think he's got the rarest quality of all. I think he's got humanity, and I think that we should be grateful for. I love him.
Yeah, and he's a great leader for the game of golf at the moment. If you're going to pin your hopes on somebody who is so relatable, despite having this talent that is otherworldly, but he goes through the whole ringer of emotions in delivering what that talent deserves.
Absolutely, but also he stands up for golf. He stands up for the purity of it and what it means. I mean, I think you only have to see about. I mean, God knows how much he would have got to go to live, but and you can say, well, he didn't need the money, so but he also was taking a stand. He was making a stand. And it was, and I think he should be rewarded for it. And it's very interesting to see what happens next. I mean, it's confirmed that money has gone, so it'll be interesting to see what happens to those who, if they'll all be coming back. I don't know, but Rory he covered himself in glory, and he covers himself in glory in almost every sort of way and facet of life.
But he took us on a ride, didn't he? I mean, talking about those WhatsApp groups. I mean, we almost crashed WhatsApp probably at the 150th Open at St Andrews. Then there was the US Open at Pinehurst. Then there was the Masters last year that he finally won. It was just emotionally exhausting for everybody. But what was the feeling like in Northern Ireland the next day after he finally got that green jacket? And he's probably going to go on and win
God willing, now. There was joy. There was real joy, because we are still kind of a small island, and the north is a small kind of region. And there is a collective consciousness about the past, and so I think that the fact that he's a beacon for the North, he's a beacon for the island. There was joy. I mean, it was kind of like a water cooler moment. Everyone was talking about it. Everyone was overjoyed. And also it's just everyone having the ability to kind of like say to each other, "Oh my God, he puts you through it, and he puts us through it." And, he's one of us, and it's also nice to feel that he belongs to us. He belongs to sport, and he belongs to golf as well.
You're listening to This Golfing Life, a Sounder podcast. Find out more about Sounder at soundergolf.com. I wanted to talk to three people who belong to you, about three people who belong to you. Peter Ludlow, Alistair Carsey, and Alan the Hawk Hartin, who won't be known to the many listeners of this podcast, but well, tell me who these people are and how long they go back with you, because they're synonymous with you as well.
When I moved to Coleraine when I was 10, I had 1 year at my dad's primary school. And then when I was, just before I started, I think I started Coleraine Inst, which was a very big school. On the first day, I met this guy with it almost looked like sort of green hair. It was Alistair Carson, because he was a swimmer and he'd been swimming in the pool that morning. And there was so much chlorine in it. It was like sort of luminescent green, fluorescent green. And we sort of hit it off. We just kind of clicked. He was dark, sort of very dry, very funny. And then in the next wee while, I met Peter Ludlow, who was a friend of theirs, and Alan Hartin. Peter and Alan had gone to primary school together, but they knew Carsey. And the four of us kind of just over the years built this relationship. And then, but of course, you had other friends at school, but it was really after we left school, Alistair Carsey and I, we shared a house in Belfast together. We went out to Jordanstown, where I went very briefly to the tertiary education. Peter did not go into tertiary education, and Alan went off to he went to Warwick. We're just sort of, I mean, it's kind of hard to think, but we were then just kind of thrown together over the years, and then somehow stuck. We were like, we all had other very close friends, but we were the four, and then as students, and we would come back to Belfast more and more. We got together. We just were inseparable. And we, did all our drinking together. We did our courting together, and we hung out. And they were just, it's interesting. When I was at drama school, they had kind of left, and when I was starting off as an actor, they would be very supportive of me. I mean, and often they would pay for things, and they were. We were like a kind of a boy band that never split up
or ever sung together.
And Peter.
Or release the record.
Peter became a draper, so he's Ulster's finest draper, Peter Ludlow. Ludlow's sitting dress hire, and he sells smashing clothes for a respectable man. Alan has retired, and he went into web design. But I spent a lot of time with him in Nottingham over the years, where Alan and I are very, very close. But the four of us have travelled together. We've been to the Masters twice together. I mean, they've done rather well out of me, I have to say, as well. I did well out of them, but they have certainly benefited from my fortuitous success, I should say, over the years. But no, we just are inseparable, and kind of have been there for each other throughout our lives. And yeah, I can't imagine a world without them.
And the reason I brought them up is I think it says something about you, that these are friendships you've had since you were at school, and they're still like brothers to you. And every time we go to Portrush, they're part of our tour, and they're absolutely legendary guys. Were they playing? Because
it's also funny though that, and again, it's almost like it's meant to be. So I mean, I now live 2 doors up from Carsey. Peter lives round the corner up the road, and Alan has a holiday apartment just like in a stone's throw. I mean, I always think if you ever want any confirmation of the power of friendship, of lifelong friendship, it's that. I mean, it's not like we all said to each other, right, so we live together. It's just we've been drawn, and what was our glue is Portrush.
Yeah. What role did those guys play in you starting to play golf? Because you were quite a late beginner.
I mean, they played. I think Peter certainly started young, because Peter's father played golf, and I think Carsey played before me. But so no, it did, because they started to go on golf trips a lot, and I hadn't played golf. but I didn't want to miss out on trips. So it seemed the natural progression. And golf had actually meant quite a lot to me, even without having played. I was ferociously passionate about sport, really, to tell you the truth, from a very early age. My father loved sport. What's interesting is my dad never had one football team, but he was mad about football, and he just loved the quality of football. He got me into George Best when I was very, very young. He'd wake me up to watch the match during the week. He would take me to, I was a Ballymena fan where I first grew up. He took me every week. And then we moved to Coleraine, and I became a Coleraine fan. But Dad loved golf, loved watching it, didn't play. I mean, there was something I got quite early on, which I think fascinated me. And I've often wondered, and there's nothing worse than an actor trying to find comparisons with something else. But I remember, I mean, it can't really be ghastly that.
All talking about their craft.
Yeah. Or watching sort of comparing acting with like neurosurgery, yes, it's very, very similar. One goes into the theatre, like, learn the words and say them. There was a bit of me that early on was fascinated about what could potentially be the loneliness of a golfer. Because you've only really got yourself to blame. Yes, you've got good teams around you, you've got coaches and all that. But it's really about fighting so much within yourself. You can have all the talent in the world, but there's still something about, it's like being gladiatorial with yourself, the competition of it at times, I think, which I find extraordinary. And also, it's you against nature, just you against the wind or the rain or the sun or the bumps and the curves. And there's something that I have always been fascinated by that, because that is an ability because for the most of them, they fail more than they win. And so the ability to get up and do it again. Now, of course, it's something that they love, but I was always, from an early age, fascinated by that. It kind of really struck me that it was an individual sport that required attitude, talent, obviously, and I was also very competitive when I was young, and I loved the notion of that competition. I mean, how that's anything to do with acting, it really probably hasn't.
Who were the players before you played golf? Who were the players that really resonated with you or captured that imagination?
I loved Watson, actually, because I watched him a lot, and I'm still actually I'm old enough to remember a good bit of Nicklaus. Again, I loved. He just clearly had an unrivaled ability to kind of focus. I mean, I think before Tiger, probably, he was probably the best of that. I mean, it's just when you look at his stats, and also I just love the swashbuckling notion of him as well. I mean, I think he sometimes gets overlooked for just how. I mean, there was something really. I mean, his swing and all that was great. And over here, I mean, Seve, of course. I mean, there he is behind you, of course. And as you know, Alan the Hawk has on his bedside table not a photograph of his wife or his kids. It's a photograph of Seve.
Well, that's how we bonded, wasn't it? Me and the Hawk. It was through our sort of blind devotion to Severiano.
Absolutely. I mean, it was him, unquestionably, but was really the one. Everyone knows. Everyone who knows anything about golf knows what Seve means to golf and what Seve meant to him, because Seve for a lot of people would be the first love of their lives. Seve covered everything.
I would consider divorcing my wife if Seve asked me to marry him. If he was still alive.
Yeah,
obviously.
no, I mean, so him I loved, and but yeah, so I then got into it. The boys got me into it, but I just couldn't. Found it very frustrating, and I still find it frustrating. I mean, I think you described my golf as, what was like Picasso meets what? He said something.
A cross between Picasso and Max Wall.
It's so good.
I just have this picture of you walking, silhouetted against the sky across the very top of a very high dune at Portrush, looking for a ball, and then me on the other side of the fairway, also on a very high dune, looking for my ball.
I played in again. I think I played in the Irish Open with Thomas Bjorn, and it was at a time when I was doing commercials for a telephone directory for quite well known commercials. And, I was playing all right, because sometimes I have days when I play. I can play well. I shot 82 around Portrush, was my best. I was playing okay, and got to the fourth, and I hit it into the rough, and I was looking. It was a pure drive into the, and to call it drive is kind of litigious.
Low poke.
But I was looking for the ball, and from the other side of the fairway, Bjorn just shouted over, "Look in yellow pages under golf," which I thought was quite smart. But it's become something, and also just all those golf trips. It's such a bonding thing. But as you know, we're all very competitive. I mean, we've had great time at Portrush, but I'm going off on a trip next week with all the boys to where Ludlow, to where Alan the Hawk. I'm also a member there in Coventry at Finham. It's a very good course, and it's a Coleraine 8 of us against the Belfast guys, and that can be brutal because the pre-tournament sort of antagonism. No, the pre-tournament sledging and all. I mean, I'm really trying to get into the opposition. So we do that, and then I've got a charity golf day. Then I've got Alex Ferguson's golf day, and then so there's a lot of golf coming up. But in terms of me and the boys, they got me into it, and then it became part of our life, and other extended friendships.
Yeah. So what age were you when you started playing?
I mean, I think I've sort of played as a teen, in kind of par threes and stuff like that, but probably not until after I left drama school. I remember when I did, I bought my first set of golf clubs in the Isle of Man. I was doing Waking Ned, that film, Waking Ned Divine, and I was staying at the Mount Murray Hotel. It was just the day after my daughter Peggy was born, and I remember going out, having to leave, and just at such an odd time when my first child had been born. I was sat in the bar, I think, looking out over the golf course. And it's funny how chatting with you, I haven't thought about this in 30 years. That's weird. I was sat in the bar feeling discombobulated and kind of a bit guilty because I had to work the next day. And I looked out and I just saw, I realized, and I hadn't quite realized, I think it was at the beginning of the film, that there was at the Mount Murray, there was a golf course attached to the hotel. And it seemed to kind of grab me. I'm really remembering this for the first time in a long time. It felt that it was sort of honestly kind of calling me. Because it obviously, there was a part of me that knew that I needed to get out and clear my head and somehow try and connect with a daughter I'd just had, but I wasn't with. And I went out and I went into the golf, and it was a Sunday, I think, or it might have been a Saturday. And it was open. I bought my first set of golf clubs and started playing. So I played a lot there on my own because it hasn't lasted because, the amount of times we've made a fool of ourselves in front of our friends playing golf. But at that stage, I just wanted to play on my own a bit to try and just even get sort of semi-competent. And from that point on, then it became an obsession. An absolute obsession. I dream. I sleep, go to bed dreaming about it. I wake up thinking about it. I mean, I'm not maybe the best person to play golf because it gets into my head a lot. Not quite. I know I'm talking to the right person though about that.
Well, you and I, when we play together, it's like some sort of self-help group without any help.
I know, it's extraordinary. I mean, Freud literally is in his coffin looking at us going, well, I told you.
Well, that was going to be my next question. What do you think golf reveals about a personality or a character that perhaps other games
I think it reveals
don't?
everything, actually. And I think it's a really good question, that because it changes so much. I mean, the thing about golf is you can go through every sort of emotion. I think it can reveal someone's competitive instinct or where they are. I think it can reveal someone's ability to express rage. I think it can reveal someone's inability to express rage. I think it can reveal attitude. I think it can reveal. I think it can really reveal people who have the ability to be very relaxed and not get bothered by things. Some of them can play badly. Some of them play very well. But I think it covers every sort of emotion known to man, I think. And it also shows you people with multi-personalities, because one day you can be totally, it just reveals where you are. I mean, you could almost say,
yes,
well, that person's relationship is going well, or work isn't going too well with them, I don't think. Well, they might be.
That person might just be about to have a bout of kidney stones.
I was about to say, they might be dying. But I think it reveals everything. I think that's what's great about it. But it does unite people, I think. It infuriates a lot of people, obviously.
But it brings people together, and that is an extraordinary thing. You're listening to This Golfing Life, a Sounder podcast. Sounder's golf gear is designed from scratch and tested on the course. Get 20% off your next basket at soundergolf.com using the code POD20. That's POD20. And you have had the opportunity, you mentioned you're going to play in Sir Alex Ferguson's golf day in the next few weeks. You've been fortunate enough to have a very close relationship with Sir Alex Ferguson, which I imagine as a Manchester United fan must be the most privileged thing that could possibly be in your life. When you play golf with Sir Alex Ferguson, what little insights into his personality do you get that you might not get in
Well, it's
everyday
interesting.
life?
I mean, to say the truth, Alex doesn't play golf at the golf days, but I mean, he's a tremendous host. But it is a question that leads on to something else. I get, I'm very fortunate to have got to know him extremely well over the years, and I consider him, a very good friend. He's also given me wonderful advice at times, really brilliant advice, where he's not been afraid to kind of say something to me. It's like, particularly when my mother, I was in New Zealand when my mother died, and flew back obviously, and I did the first leg from Auckland to LA, and I got pretty drunk on the plane. I was really mourning that, not being there, and the loss of my mother. And I got to LA and I phoned Jason, his son, and said, tell your dad that my mum's gone. And he said, all right, keep your phone on. So I got on the plane to fly back from LA to London, and the number came up. And I had him on the phone as the boss, and I went, hello. And he went, James, you've lost your mother. And I went, yeah, she's gone. I was really kind of feeling sorry for myself and quite drunk, obviously. And he said, James, the loss of a mother is one of the worst things that will ever happen to his son. There will be worse, but that is one of the worst things that will ever happen. I went, yeah. And he said, right, now sober up, not one more drink. You're going home to bury your mother, to look after your 3 sisters and look after your father, who's now a widow. And I went, okay. And that was it. But he had the knowledge and the kind of the courage to say to me, to like go through me, to understand the loss is terrible, but now you've got a responsibility. And so something like that reveals an awful lot about a man, And I just remember thinking, my God, I mean, he terrified me, but he was right. And I just thought that is not only great advice, but just the courage and the sense to kind of, to tell me that. No one else could have told me that like that. And it really focused me and made me go back and do exactly what I needed to do and what I should have done, which I probably wouldn't have without that call. And you find out enough. I mean, so he's amazing in that respect. But, I was with him at the Brentford match, and he's just so many stories and wonderful humour. And I've spent a lot of time with him and all the family, his grandchildren. And he's just brilliant with them. And his son, Jason, made a really brilliant film called Never Give In, which I think people, if they haven't seen, have seen it. And when you watch that, you see that it's not a film about football. It's about a man, really. I'm lucky to learn an awful lot from him and share a lot of giggles with him and a lot of wine with him and travel with him. But he's, you understand. And I mean, I've spent quite a lot of time with him together with Kenny, King Kenny, your hero. And, when you understand, when you reflect on the bitter kind of rivalry between them, times, really kind of edgy stuff between them, you see them now just wonderful and at ease in each other's company, enjoying the wine, they generally gang up on me. And they meet in the office after the match. And that's when you also see just the sacrifices they made when they were working, But now it's kind of done. And, they don't need to worry about their legacy. They don't need to worry about rivalry anymore. They can just be together. It's something to behold,
I mean, I remember hearing you talking about meeting George Best, and what he meant to you as a kid. Kenny Dalglish is the same for me.
Yeah.
I've never met Kenny, but I know that if I did meet him, I would have to hug him, just like I did when I met Seve. I was sort of overtaken by this desire to give him a hug and just sort of express what he means to me. And
well, you will meet him. You will meet him. We'll do that next year. But I mean, no, Kenny's fantastic. But but they're also if I ever say to Alex, what about if I ask him about different players, if I say to him about what did you think of Kenny again, and he'd always say, oh, he's the best bum player in the world, in the way that he was able to back in.
Yeah.
And if you say to Kenny about Alex, I mean, what do you think of him? You go, oh, he's not bad. I mean, they don't give they don't give too much to each other, but they're fantastic together, and they give so much time to other people. But as I say, I think what's important with them is you would never have to say, what do you hope your legacy is, or anything like that, because it's done. They don't have to worry about anything in a sense, But they are funny, great sort of giants of the sport.
Absolutely. And Sir Alex Ferguson has had that open line of communication with Rory McIlroy as well, hasn't he? I mean, you mentioned working with Rory's foundation. I know that Sir Alex has done some speaking in and around that.
Actually, I interviewed when I worked with Rory, because the first year I interviewed him for the first half of the show, and then I was in Dublin, and then Alex came on in the second half, and I interviewed him. I'll tell you, and I don't think I'm speaking out of turn. Alex certainly won't think that, and I'm sure Rory won't. It was the year that Rory won the Irish Open. I think it was, I wonder if it was after he got his injury. But anyway, so he was playing in the Irish Open, and I think he had a bad, I can't remember where we were it must have been before the competition began. Or maybe it was, I can't remember. Anyway, that's not the point. The point is that I think Rory had been struggling a little bit, and Alex said to me, he said, I must try and get hold of Rory. I want to talk to Rory before we do the interview. So apparently I had a private meeting with Rory, and I think he talked to him a lot about attitude. This is a long time ago. But whatever the conversation was, it clearly worked, because Rory then went on and just played and won the tournament. Alex adores Rory and sees something brilliant in him, but I think as a lot of us do, even though, as we've talked about, he speaks with such authority, such honesty, and he is one of the greatest of all time, I think Alex also sees a kind of, not vulnerability, but because there's a fragility in Rory at times in terms of his play at times, which he clearly is overcoming now. But I mean, I think Alex was able to find something in him, which is what he's been able to do all his life in terms of his career. You know, all those different personalities he worked with. I mean, he's an understanding of how to talk to people.
I think the really interesting player in Ferguson's career is Eric Cantona. In many ways, a player who is the sort of antithesis of what Ferguson wants, a sort of virtuoso, seemingly almost like an individual player, a player that's very hard to categorize. But the way he dealt with Cantona and the way he handled Cantona, I think was, for me as a non-Man United fan and as a big Liverpool fan, as you know, I think that said most about his genius as a manager in many ways.
I think so too. But also, you know, he knew that Eric was the missing piece, you know, unquestionably. And he couldn't believe it when he got him. And also, it was like he was telling me last week, he said when he was at a European match, and Gerard Houllier said to him, you should buy Cantona. You should buy Cantona, because Howard Wilkinson was getting rid of him, and it was Houllier who told him to get Cantona. And then he said to Platini, I think as well, because he must have been at a French game, and Platini said, yeah, buy Cantona. And it's funny, you know, I know a lot of the players, and they laughed, but they said at the time it was a nightmare that Eric could do whatever he wanted. He could wear whatever he wanted. When they were getting absolutely hammered by the boss for having a button undone, like really hammered, then Eric would walk into the players' lounge or whatever in kind of a caftan, and Alex would be like, but why can't you look like him? Yeah. So I think, I mean, but also, you know, and Eric goes to the matches a lot still, and I would see Eric, and I think Alex saved Eric in a way. I mean, I think people talk about Eric retiring early. I think Eric would certainly think, and he's testified to that Alex can see, Alex reads people, you know, he can read people so well. And he obviously saw that Eric had a voice that wasn't being expressed. He had a beauty and an artistry that he wasn't being allowed to fully unlock. And as much as Eric was the missing piece for United and winning their title for the first time, I think Alex unlocked the true beauty of Cantona. And that's what great management is.
Yeah, and it's interesting you said about, you know, as Sir Alex Ferguson's private conversation with Rory. I mean, in many ways, that mental fragility, the vulnerability that Rory McIlroy has is, again, anathema to the sort of men that Alex Ferguson wants. But that ability to relate to different types of people.
No, absolutely. Because what he is, if you said what's the most important thing to Alex, not only in sport, but in life, he would say attitude. And so I think what he realizes that everyone has to have the right attitude that suits them. So it's, you know, attitude's not all the same, but you have to be able to unlock the right attitude for that person. And he said it to me a lot about life, and he said it to me about acting. He's often said to me, I can tell when you've got the right attitude when I watch your work. And it's but to have someone who gives that advice for free and have it to come from Sir Alex, you know, it's pretty impressive.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't really talked about your career, but it has been an amazing career, and it is an amazing career. The thing that really brought you to the project that brought you to the sort of attention of the wider public was obviously Cold Feet. But I wanted to speak to you really about Bloody Sunday, a film that sort of, for me, changed the trajectory of your career, if you like, or opened new possibilities for it. But also I wanted to understand what that project, how that changed the way you think about the homeland you spoke so eloquently about at the beginning of this conversation.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny. I still get when I talk about either my work in the North or when I talk about anything to do with the North, I find it very hard not to be affected by it. And I think that I get quite emotional about it. And I can't quite work out exactly what that is. And I think it's a combination of things. But to go to Bloody Sunday, yes, I'd been doing a lot of work. But, the background to me is that I was raised a Protestant in rural County Antrim, although my father, and this has been documented before, but my father sent me and my three sisters to the convent to learn piano because he wanted to set out a message that there'd be integration. Acting was, going while Cold Feet had taken off. I was very conscious about the fact that and it's important to I think, include Cold Feet into it, because when I auditioned for that, I had been doing work, but I knew that had a real potential. It was only a pilot, but I knew it had potential. And for the only time in my life, I went into an audition and I said, I am the only person to play this role, because I wasn't that well known. I said, I am the only person, and I said it's because I'm unknown, mostly. I mean, I've done a bit of work. I'm Northern Irish, and this character should be Northern Irish living in an English setting with nothing to do with the Troubles. I knew that it had the potential to have an impact of people hearing that accent, my accent, in a non-political context that wasn't on the news, it wasn't to do with terrorism. And so they cast that, and then that had an impact, and it gave me great success. And I was playing football a lot in London at the time, and one of the guys, with a bunch of actors and writers, so there was a lot of watch my face. I mean, it wasn't exactly... It wasn't Leeds of the 70s versus Shopper Harris and Chelsea. It was... but anyway, Paul Greengrass, the director, he would play, and we got to know each other a bit. And then when I was filming series 2 of Cold Feet, I think it was, possibly series 3, he called me and said, Mark Redhead, who's a producer, and I want to come and talk to you about a project. And they came up and sat down, and he kind of produced a very rough draft of his idea of what making a film of Bloody Sunday was. And to my chagrin, I didn't know an awful lot about Bloody Sunday, because there's unquestionably, it's just a bit to my chagrin. But truthfully, I didn't know a huge amount about Bloody Sunday, because it's undeniable. I don't care what people say. It's undeniable that during my childhood, at that time, Protestants were taught history with a kind of a British perspective, and Catholics were taught with an Irish perspective. Bloody Sunday was the thing that Eamon McCann, a human rights guy, famously said. It was what the British didn't want to remember and the Irish couldn't forget. Anyway, Paul said, I want you to be at the centre of this film. I want you to play a character called Ivan Cooper, who was himself a Protestant, middle-class Protestant, but from Derry, but he was the MP for Derry, and so his electorate was 99% nationalist, and yet he was a Protestant, and Paul was fascinated by that. So anyway, long story short, I did a lot of research on the film. I hummed and hawed about it. I had to read everything about the Savile Inquiry, which was about to start. I just did so much research once I'd agreed to do it. But I remember being scared, and before filming began, I contacted Ivan Cooper and said, without letting Paul and everyone know, I said, I want to do the march with you. He hadn't done the march in 30 years. He lived in Derry, but he couldn't do it because he felt culpable about the 13 that died, for bringing them out, because it was the last kind of throw of the dice for the civil rights movement at that time. And he said, I can't do it. And I said, you've got to do the march with me. So we did it, and I sat down with him, and we talked for hours. And it just confirmed that I was making the right decision to do it, because it was much bigger than me, but I was still concerned about what people in Derry would think. This Protestant kind of very famous actor now coming to tell our story, our national story. But so I went for a pint on my own, because it had been quite a traumatic day, and I was sitting in a bar in Derry, the Strand Hotel, which famously was there during the Troubles. And there was a kind of a porthole behind me, and this guy grabbed my shoulder and said, who am I? And I looked at him and I said, you're Bubbles Donaghy. You were the first person shot on Bloody Sunday. You were shot in the thigh. And he kind of reached across and said, right, you'll do for us. And it was confirmation that I had done the work. And from that point on, I realized that it was a responsibility. It was a tremendous privilege. But it taught me that actually, of course, acting is there to entertain, but it can have worth. And I'm not sure if I'd ever considered that. It can educate, it can create debate, it can change people's minds, it can throw a mirror up to a real life situation. And as Paul said, if it could be a pebble in the wall of peace in Northern Ireland, then that would be something. And I think it was. But for me personally, also, it showed me that the job could have worth, because I'd spent a lifetime thinking it's not really a real job, this. But it also made me re-examine where I come from, the deeply complex history of where I come from and its relationship with the rest of the British Isles. And it was transformative, kind of life affirming and job affirming, and made me understand that I don't refute in any way my culture. I'm from a Protestant background, but it doesn't define me. And I consider myself very much an Irishman from the north of Ireland who's a Protestant. So it changed everything for me.
Can you talk to me a little bit about your work with the Wave Trauma Centre in Northern Ireland? And did that connection with that charity come out of indirectly or directly from the Bloody Sunday project?
No, I don't think it directly. I think my fame or my maybe the fact that I was prepared to do work in Northern Ireland, and maybe actually I don't know. But anyway, funny enough, Ludlow, who we were talking about earlier, Peter Ludlow called me. And it's about, I think I'm there 25 years with Wave, maybe even more. But he called and said, there's a woman called Sandra Peake who works for a charity called Wave, wants you to go to a fundraising thing, and because Peter had asked me to, I went along to. I met this woman. I went to this charity auction. Wave were an organisation set up by women on both sides of the Troubles who had been bereaved. It was set up to offer counselling and help to anyone bereaved, traumatised or affected by the Troubles, regardless of their age, background, whatever. And I was immediately really struck by them. They were a small outfit doing extraordinary things with people. Their referrals were going up and up and up. I remember I bought a painting that night, and I thought that was it. I've done my bit. But it sort of nagged at me. I mean, it didn't leave me the work they were doing that they were offering. And so I kind of got in contact with them again. And when the peace happened, they were really struggling. It was like a lot of their funding was taken away, which was just ridiculous. It was like people saying, oh, there's peace, so no one needs kind of trauma counselling anymore. And of course, the trauma goes on and on and on. It goes through generations. It's cross-generational trauma. There are people still not coming to Wave for the first time because their daddy finally admitted that something terrible had happened or he had committed something. So it goes on and on. Anyway, so we did a big thing I got involved in a thing called Art Wave, and I primarily got involved with Art Wave because I went to visit Wave one day, and there was a little girl who was 6 who hadn't spoken in 3 years since she saw her father get shot in front of her, and not a word. And Wave found her, and they asked her to try and draw a painting of what that happened, and it released her. And Art released her and gave her an opportunity to start talking about it, getting help for it. And it seemed to me that Art Wave, so they use art a lot, so it seemed that there was a good way to raise money. So I did a big auction thing and got lots of celebrity art, and very, very established artist Tracy Emin came, blah, blah, blah. So the work was going well, and I was involved in it for years. Their referrals were going up. But then I got hugely involved in the families of the disappeared, which is really where the core of my work is with Wave. The disappeared are 17 families, different individuals who were abducted by the IRA over the years and tortured and murdered in unmarked graves, and their families were never told where they were. And so I first met Mags McKinney a very, very long time ago. Her son, Brian, had been found along with another in an unmarked grave. He was diagnosed very early on as having the brain of a 6-year-old, the mind of a 6-year-old, and yet somehow he was abducted, and she had got, through the help of Clinton, to cut a long story short, she had got her son back. But she talked a lot about every night imagine him coming through the door. She talked about him crying out for her just before he was shot, and on the years and years that went on, and it became an obligation in a way for me to get involved with this, because the Wave were doing because by this stage the IRA were providing the details of where the bodies were, but there was a lot of success in it. We recovered an awful lot of bodies, and I've seen the joy that the families have been given by getting their their loved ones back, because, you know, everyone deserves to have a Christian burial or whatever type of burial. Everyone deserves to go to a wake. Everyone deserves a grave where the parents can go and stand and talk to them. So, I mean, the collective, and joy is kind of an odd word to use, but they've all had those that got their remains back. After many 30 years, quite a lot of people had died, partners had died, parents had died, but all the families stick together, and Wave is very, very united in that respect, and that's thanks to Sandra. There are still some bodies out there, and we're still trying to locate them. And I've been to the bogs, I've been to the digs, I've stood with Oliver McVeigh and his sister Dimpna as they stand in the rain looking over a big bog with diggers there, hoping against hope. And, you know, and as Northern Ireland does move on, it is so vital that we do not forget the plight of others, you know, it comes down to, I think, particularly people at home, do we have a social and a moral responsibility to these people? And I think we do, and I think we know we do.
Well, I think, you know, there's no doubt about it. You've been a fantastic ambassador for Northern Ireland, an ambassador, you know, I don't think really covers it. I mean, I really, the whole subject of the disappeared came to me from reading the book Say Nothing by Patrick Radden Keefe, which was very, very powerful, and then a couple of other books. But
you know, I know those families. Sorry, Dan. I know all those families, and what's been amazing is what I've gathered most from them in this lifelong plight, and also so many other families who haven't had justice for theirs. I mean, that from all sides, you know, there's real debate about legacy at the minute and whether or not people will go unpunished for unsolved crimes. And those families, I know them all. I mean, I know hundreds of victims who go to Wave, but the families of the disappeared, when I've met them over the years, overwhelming thing that you get from is it's not rage, it's humanity. It's not rage, it's humanity. They're incredible. I mean, like when they've had their loved ones returned, as I say, after all those years, at the mass for those, they say thank you to the people who came forward with information. They're they remind you, my God, that there is good in the world, you know.
Yeah, I mean, incredibly humbling, rewarding work, and work.
Oh my God!
Work that you've done over 25 years. You're listening to This Golfing Life, a Sounder podcast. Find out more about Sounder at soundergolf.com. But in fairness, Jimmy, you know, you talked about Alex Ferguson being very charitable. You've been incredibly charitable over the years to a number of different causes, not least
but it's a privilege.
Yeah. But I always thought that with the mini Masters, which you played in pretty much every year, and sure you would have played in this year if it wasn't, you know, you're at a wedding. But you know, the mini Masters sort of began when Jimmy Nesbitt turned up.
Well, it was the best. It was the best. I mean, it's funny, you know, and also talk about forging friendships. You know, you and I forged a great friendship. Mini Masters opened up that friendship with you, with Steve Martin, with Gordon Smart, with all of us, you know, that go to Portrush. That whole crowd that has become known as the Tony Martin Tour, named after Steve's dad. Without the Mini Masters, and the Mini Masters, it's the greatest competition in the world of any sport, without a shadow of a doubt, because you were right at the forefront of it.
As I said, it wasn't Mini Masters Friday until Mr. J. Nesbitt Esquire was on the property.
I always at the Mini Masters had a golf club in one hand and a pint in the other. That was what was so brilliant about it. I mean, I'm devastated because it was away for a few years. Devastated I can't be there this year, but I look forward to the next one. It's amazing. And it brought us together. It was just the best.
Well, we look forward to having you back. There's one comment you made earlier where you talked about certain golfers' ability or inability to express rage.
Yeah.
You and I have had a couple of meltdowns on the golf course. Yeah. I think one of my favourite of yours, it always reminded me of that scene. I think it was in the film Clockwise with John Cleese, when he pulls the bough of the tree down and starts attacking his Mini. I think it was from that film.
No, it was from Faulty Towers, I think.
Faulty Towers, yeah,
yes. Right. Yeah, no, I've done that. I mean, I smacked the club into the ground. But you know who has the worst temper? The Ulster's finest draper, Peter Madden Ludlow Esquire.
Does he really? Because he's such a mild-mannered sort of, he's your classic tailor, isn't he? Suits you, sir, but in the sort of Northern Irish delivery.
No, absolutely. No, but he really can... He can hurl clubs for miles. He can do to golf club what Tessa Sanderson did to a javelin.
What's the funniest Ludlow head off you've seen in your many tours?
I saw him absolutely lose it in the sand at the 15th in Portrush about a year and a half ago, where not only did he hurl the club, he then did a kind of a mad ancient tribal war dance in the bunker, just stamping around. I mean, if you saw it in a film directed by the most extreme director, I don't know if it was Lynch or Tarantino or if it was like a gritty Ken Loach film, you would watch that and go, no, that just doesn't happen. That's too much, and that doesn't happen in real life. So that's good. But then, of course, there's the extreme. There's then Alistair David Carson, or Carsey as we know him. Although he's got a lot more competitive now, but he had a rather different approach to golf in the past, quite relaxed. Although then we went to a Masters tour, and he did get very upset there, particularly the day we were trying to take him to the range to try and get him to slow the arc of his backswing, which kind of like he touched his left foot every time on the head of the club when he was swinging, hit the ball. But we took him onto the range, and it was lovely. I think it was at Poppy Hills, and on the range there was beautiful pyramids of Callaway balls. And for his first practice, for his first swing on the range, he took the club back so far, he hit the Callaway balls pyramid, and they all just came rushing towards him around his feet, which was the final straw that day. But in the past, he was brilliant, because I actually wasn't playing with him this day. But notoriously, the fourth hole at Portrush, Fred Daly is one of the
Great hole.
It's a very tough par fours, and it's the hardest hole in the course. But he was playing with Ludlow and someone else one day, and he put it in the green on the toughest hole in the course, and Peter was in the car and said, what'd you get there, Carsey? And Carsey went, 1, 2, 3. He just couldn't quite recall that he'd birdied the hardest hole in golf. But yes, you get to see quite a lot over the years.
Yeah. So what's next, Jimmy? I mean, what projects have you got coming up? I love the last thing you did with Mini Driver and Ruth Jones.
Oh yeah, no, I did run away. I've done a few. Yeah, well, I mean, what's interesting about the Netflix thing is they're kind of outrageous, and they're roller coasters, and they're great stories and good characters, but the thing is, they're huge. It's not meant to sound arrogant, but, because I've had a level of success for a number of years, but globally, not necessarily, But with the Netflix thing, it's like so funny. I hadn't really considered it. The age of 61, anywhere I go now, people know me, whatever country, and people come up, because it just shows you the power of Netflix. So,
that's what I was going to ask you, Jimmy. I mean, like the fact that, this body of work you've had, which is a great body of work, that I've always been surprised that Hollywood or a huge US TV series hasn't come calling. Because,
well, in a sense, though, I didn't want to. I mean, I kind of made a decision when a lot of actors were kind of moving over there. I just wasn't sure if I wanted to go, and I mean, I wouldn't have minded doing it for a short time, but to dedicate myself to kind of sitting beside a pool, going into meetings every day when there's hundreds of, like a kind of a cattle market for projects that I didn't even like, with accents I couldn't do. I mean, it just wasn't my idea of the ladder of perfect, utopia, reaching that utopia. I felt there was a lot more work that I could be more challenged by, more interested in, and also have more fun kind of here, and also being near to my friends and stuff. That's not to say I wasn't considering the notion of working there, just it didn't really work out like that. But with these Netflix shows now, the reach is huge. So it'll be interesting to see if other things come up. I mean, I don't know, there's a few things bubbling around, but right now I am going to have, as it's Friday, I'm going to go and have a spot of lunch.
Yeah, well,
it's been thrilling to be able to talk to you.
It's been thrilling to be able to talk to you. Jimmy, thanks for your time. Thanks for your friendship in golf, and everything you've done for the Mini Masters over the years, and the fun that we've had. And I look forward to seeing you on the hallowed ground of Royal Portrush very soon, my friend.
Well, we've got to do that tour, because it's so important, and I know we've had such wonderful friendships as a result.
Yeah. All right, Jimmy. Listen, have a great lunch. See you soon.
Thank you. See you very soon. Thanks, Dan.
Thank you for listening to This Golfing Life, a Sounder podcast. You can find out more about Sounder at soundergolf.com. If you want to follow me and find out more about RNGC, Britain's premier backyard golf course. You can find me on Instagram at RNGC2021. Thanks for listening.